Hey everyone, Matt here from Docs Running, and today we're going to do a comparison review of two of the anatomically forefoot shaped super racing shoes on the market, the Topo Specter Elite versus the Altra Vanish Carbon 3. And there's actually a third one that we'll also mention. So we're going to compare these not only because a lot of people have been asking, but because I have a ton of miles on each one of these, and it's really great to finally have these options solidly on the market. And they're really the first two major ones to be out there. Yes, there were previous versions of the Altra Vanish Carbon, but I would argue those weren't full super shoes. They didn't have full midsoles the way we would hope for. They weren't that max stack height in terms of, and they certainly weren't as competitive as other options on the market. So these are the two first major ones, and Topo really hit it out of the park with their first attempt at this, and Altra finally is getting things moving. So you might want to know, hey, if I want an anatomic toe box, which one might work better for me? So let's get into some of this stuff and help you figure out, if you're even interested in this stuff, which one might work better for you. And if you're not interested, hopefully you learn some stuff about forefoot rockers and all the stuff we're going to talk about when it comes to some of these interesting things. So as always, we're going to start off with specs in my men's size 10. The Specter Elite is coming in at 216 grams or 7.6 ounces in my men's size 10. The Altra Vanish Carbon is coming in heavier, coming in at 8.6 ounces or about 244 grams. So about an ounce difference between the two of these in my size 10. So quite a bit of a weight difference, but that will make sense based on the stack height. Topo Specter Elite is coming in at 39 millimeters in the heel, 34 in the forefoot for a 5 millimeter drop. The Altra Vanish Carbon is supposedly 40 millimeters in the heel, 36 in the forefoot for a 4 millimeter drop, and I'll explain that in a second. But my measurements has that a little bit higher, and Running Warehouse also has this at 42.38, so that makes sense. And it does feel a little bit taller than the Specter Elite, but also that's possibly because the midsole doesn't compress nearly as much. And that's where I want to start out between these two of these. Yes, we'll get to the upper, but the midsoles are different. The Rev foam is an ATPU foam in the Specter Elite. It is very bouncy. It is a little bit on the softer side, and there's a massive forefoot rocker there, versus the Altra Vanish Carbon 3 uses what's called Fast Race, which is the first time they're really using a PIMA-based midsole, and there's two layers. It's a little bit firmer compared to the Specter Elite, but it still has a good amount of responsiveness, and it's taking some time, but it is getting better as things continue onward. But those aren't the things that are going to really make or break you. It's really going to be more of the toe box and the geometries that are really going to make the major difference. Yes, Specter Elite, a little bit more responsive and certainly lighter. Yes, Altra Vanish Carbon, a little bit firmer, not a firm shoe, but comparatively a little bit more kind of grounded feel, and I'll explain that in just a second. But what really gets it is going to be some of the geometry. So much larger heel bevel in the Specter Elite, very rockered ride. And the other thing you got to be aware of, yes, both these have very large forefoot rockers or these curves up in front, but the Specter Elite also has quite a bit of toe spring, meaning your toes are held in extension. If that's something you want, and that can be good for some people because it actually locks up their foot a little bit because it holds them, that toe tightens up the plantar fascia, which for some people, that actually creates a little more stiffness in their foot, can roll off a little bit better. Other people, that's not quite as good because that can pull on some stuff. In the Vanish Carbon 3, yes, massive forefoot rocker, very noticeable. It's one of the things actually that makes this shoe not feel nearly as low, because the forefoot rocker starts so far back here, almost in the midfoot, that you start tipping forward and you don't really get to that stiff forefoot. So very smooth forefoot transition over here and over here as well, but it makes that drop feel not nearly as low as that 4, and we'll talk about why 4 millimeter drop's actually really good for a super shoe. So really large, ovally rockered ride in the Specter Elite, whereas there's a good heel bevel here, but it's the forefoot rocker is really so long, it's really noticeable when you start rolling forward the second that you get in there. But a little bit less toe spring. There's a teeny bit, but not nearly as much, and a little bit more, not flex, but a little bit more room up here with where the plate is to get your toes to be able to push into a little more straighter position. So if you're very sensitive to toe spring, the Vanish Carbon 3 is going to be the better option. If you're okay with that, the Specter Elite is going to be fine if you want that really big over rockered shoe. And it's kind of what makes these shoes both really good for long distance running. I have done 10K to marathon pace. They do excellent. I've done long runs in both these shoes. They are very, very good at that. It's some of the few super shoes that I don't feel are unstable because they both have wider bases, especially in the forefoot, that make them a little bit like stable neutral S rides for super shoes, which is relative, but they can handle long distance well. Where they don't do as well with such large rockers for me is it doesn't feel like I can engage my calves as much. So if you're looking for a short distance racing shoe like 5K, these may not be the best options. You certainly could still run a 5K. They're just not going to be the fastest shoe over the mile 5K effort because, again, especially a little heavier over here for a super shoe, not terrible. But the forefoot rocker really shifts the workload up to your hips and kind of takes a little workload out of your calves, which is great for longer distance because calves are very metabolically expensive over longer distance efforts, but it makes that really efficient. Just know running super fast, not really the best option in both these. They're really 10K, especially half to full marathon shoes, and they do really good at that. Just that rocking motion does extremely well. Now, let's talk about the toe box and we'll talk about stability. So, Topo has the far wider and higher volume fit compared to Altra. Altra, I was kind of surprised when I put these on. I was getting a little bit of pressure at the top here because even though this isn't thick, it's a thin upper material, the toe guard is noticeable and the volume is quite low. So it sits very low against the top of the foot, which I haven't had any blisters, but it makes it feel a little bit more snug. It's also on Ultra's kind of more racing last, so things aren't nearly as wide as some of their other shoes, but no, it's still an anatomic toe box. You still got room to move your toes. Topo, on the other hand, you got a wide foot or you want as much room as possible. This has tons more room, not that same kind of pressure, not low volume. You want as much room as possible. Topo is really going to get it. And this feels absolutely awesome over longer distances, especially with foot swelling. It's like if I had to choose a road ultra marathon shoe, which I would not do a road ultra personally, I would choose Topo only because there's so much more room for swelling and so much more room for toe movement, which, yes, does make this shoe feel just a teeny bit longer than the Vanish Carbon 3, but over longer distances, if you are sensitive to rubbing and chafing, the Specter 3 is going to be a lot better. I keep calling it 3. The Specter Elite is going to be a lot better option just because it has way more room there. Now, something that makes things really different, again, low volume throughout in the Vanish Carbon 3, a little bit more room throughout in the Specter Elite, let me not call it 3. The heels are incredibly different, and not the midsole geometry here, but which is a little different. But what's really different is how the heels are designed. So Specter Elite, very stiff heel counter. They've got this little pad up here that kind of hooks into your Achilles, which for me, initially was okay when my Achilles flared up. I did not like how stiff the heel counter was and the fact that this pushes into my Achilles tendon. So if you're sensitive to that, be aware this may not work well. As opposed to the Vanish Carbon 3, very flexible. Apparently, yes, there is a heel counter back here, but for those of you with Haglund deformities, this is a dream shoe. Very nice, flexible, lots of movement, does not bother me at all. So sensitive heels, the Vanish Carbon is going to do a lot better. Those that don't have heel sensitivities and want a stiffer counter, Specter Elite is going to do a lot better there. But overall, a lot more room in the Specter Elite, more snug, low volume in the Ultra Vanish Carbon, while still having those anatomic forefoots, just very different heels and very different setups. Tongues, all that kind of stuff fit really, really nicely. Neither one of these are gusseted, so if that's something you want for security, they don't have them, but I haven't had any slippage. Both are very secure overall when you lock the laces down, and you don't have to worry. Both of them use these kind of these laces that lock in super well, so I've never had lace slippage. Locks in great, and I've not had the lace lock either one of them. Great security, both of them, not a problem at all. Final piece is going to be the stability of the two of them. Now, what's great, as I mentioned earlier, both have wider soles. Both of them also, and I have called this the wrong thing for years, have some good top lines here, which is the correct term. I was calling the sidewalls. The sidewall is actually the side part of the midsole, which makes sense. The top lines that come up in the Topo Specter Elite, the top line comes up right in the midfoot here and up into the forefoot. So if you need a little bit of midfoot pressure, it actually works well. If you're sensitive to these, be aware it might cause some blistering. For me, it just felt really nice, like it was supporting my arch just that teeny bit. No, the midfoot's a little bit narrow, but that offsets that a little bit. Both of them have the really nice wide forefoot with quite a bit of sole flare here. So forefoot especially, very stable on both these. Where the Ultra kind of wins out with this, and I thought this was going to be a little gimmick at first, but it does work. Their plate design is very different. The Specter Elite has a fairly full, traditional full-length plate. What Ultra's doing differently is they have a little bit of a slit right here, so the big toe and part of the plate can actually act a little bit independently. I believe Puma did this with their first Nitro Elite version, I really like this. This also allows the big toe to kind of operate a little differently, and this little bit of sole flare here really helps give a little bit better forefoot control. They do have a top line in the heel and the lateral medial sides, which just makes the heel feel a little bit more stable. Slightly firmer ride also makes this feel a little bit stable too. But overall, that piece really gets that big toe to engage well, and I didn't think it was going to do that, but it actually works really well. I really, really like that. So if that's something you want, if you want to be able to engage your big toe really well, the Vanish Carbon 3 is going to do really, really well with that. Both of them have the wider forefoots, obviously a lot wider as you can see in the Specter Elite, but if you need forefoot structure, both work well. If you need a little bit more midfoot structure, the Specter Elite is going to be better. If you want a little bit more stable heel, the Vanish Carbon 3 is going to be a little better. But overall, these are both excellent shoes. I really love the Specter Elite for being a little bit lighter, being a little bit more responsive, a little bouncier. However, the heel is getting to me in the upper, and that's where the Vanish Carbon 3 is coming in a little bit more, just because that flexibility here just takes so much pressure off for me. My Achilles is doing great. It's progressing really well. I just have little flare-ups here and there as I push it, so Vanish Carbon's working great. But if you really want an anatomic toe box, these are the two major options out there, and they are both great. They're both great long-distance shoes. We don't really have much in the shorter distance stuff. There is the Vanish Pulse from Altra, but that's not a super shoe by any means. It's a more traditional foam, EVA, I think EVA-based foam, not bouncy, not responsive, lower stack height. So if you're looking for a super racer in that distance, not going to be the best option, but they can still move. So if you want to use it, great. I'm just enjoying the hell out of these. Final, I keep forgetting this, durability. They are both awesome. I think the Altra shoe is going to last a little bit longer because the the outsole is full length ground contact. I have 50 miles on my pair of Ultras, and I have 60 miles on my pair of Specter Elites from Topo. I am starting to see, this is my left shoe, starting to see a little bit of wear here, but I still haven't pulled off the heel yet, which is great. So I'm a little worried about this durability, but the midsole has remained exactly the same throughout the life. The Vanish Carbon 3, when I first put this on, it was a lot firmer than I was expecting, and I was a little bit disappointed with that, but it's broken in and it's gotten a little bit softer, a little bit bouncier with more miles, so it's holding up super well. But I think the Vanish Carbon might last a little bit longer, but I'm going to try to get both these to 100 miles and see how each one of these do, because so far they're doing great. Just over here, if you want the wider fitting, softer, bouncier, lighter ride, Specter Elite's going to be probably the better option for you as long as the heel doesn't bother you and a little toe spring doesn't bother you. If you want the, a little bit more snug, a little bit longer forefoot rocker, less of a forefoot, less toe spring over here, a little more flexible here, and don't mind a little extra weight, a little better durability in my opinion, I think the Vanish Carbon 3 might work well for you. But both these are excellent options. Altra, really excited for you. Do want to see you get this a little bit lighter. Topo, excellent job with your first one of these. Work on that heel counter. There is a third option out there, and this was unexpected, but I had to bring this up. And On's Cloud Boom Strike 2, I don't have the LS version, also has a fairly anatomic toe box, and I was very surprised about this. Now, this is slightly lighter than the other two of them, 40 millimeters heel, 35 in the forefoot for a 5 millimeter drop, so sitting very close to these other two. And it's the weight's coming in at 214 grams, or about 7.5 ounces, my size 10. So a little bit lighter. Same thing though, this shoe does not work well for very short distances. It is incredibly stiff. It's the only one of the three of these that's caused me a little bit of pain in the rear foot every time I put these on, but that goes away. But it's the probably the softest of all of these. It's not quite as responsive as the Specter Elite, not quite as firm initially as the Altra Vanish Carbon, but it has this really nice wider toe box that is anatomic. It is the lowest volume, is the most snug of the group of them, but a little extra volume than the Vanish Carbon, so if that's something you want. The heel has been a little bit weird for me because it comes in a little bit, not nearly as bad as the Specter Elite, but still just a little bit irritating. And the laces, unfortunately, don't stay as well, which thank goodness. The tongue is attached a little bit at the front, still a little more free-floating, but this is an extra one. Hey, if you want something a little bit softer, a little bit lighter, and really stiff, this also might be an option. So there are three major ones. This wasn't supposed to be one of them, but it kind of ended up doing it just because, yeah, that's a pretty good forefoot width. So yeah, you've got three options. And now I'm really curious if any of you have tried this, let me know. I'm really curious to know what you think. I'm curious to know what the Ultra people are thinking about a 4mm drop super shoe. And I think you have to do that with a stack height this high, because if you don't, remember, I know you don't want to hear this, most people at some point during a race are probably going to start landing on their heel. If you have a Pima softer midsole foam in a shoe this tall, and you have a 0 drop option, you're going to create a negative drop shoe dynamically when you land on the heel. You got to have a little drop just to offset that. That's why I'm happy that these all have a little drop, because it offsets the softer midsoles, and that it will help you transition forward rather than getting stuck in the rear foot and having to pull up and over a speed bump. That's too much stress on the Achilles and calves. And if you're trying to do a shorter distance race, great, that makes total sense. There's some shoes that have come out recently. It's like, feels like I'm sitting in a negative drop shoe, and when I'm doing like 5K efforts, that kind of makes sense. You want that stretch, it's light as possible. I get it. But for efficiency over marathon distances, you want to keep that rolling forward. You don't want to get stuck there. And the more you overly engage your poor calves during longer distance event, again, it's not going to be as efficient. That's why all these super shoes are rocker. Not that you don't want to use your calves. You absolutely need to make sure those are some of the strongest components of your body, because your Achilles tendon is one of the top injured areas, especially as you get older. So take care of that thing. But a little drop is a really good thing. Are any of these high drop? Absolutely not. If you have a sensitive Achilles tendons, you might want to be a little cautious with these. As I have run in them, just depending on the day, I use little heel lifts to offset some of that in these, and that takes some pressure off my Achilles, and it hasn't affected the ride at all. But no, they are lower drops, so it's something you also want. These are going to be great for you. So last thing I want to know, what do you think about these? What do you think about my comparisons? Do you agree or disagree? Please let me know in the comments below, because it's not about me, it's about others. I'm trying to share stuff with you. I'm super excited. We finally have anatomic toe box shaped Super Racers. It's taken forever, but thankfully we now have this for people that want a little bit more like natural kind of foot shape while still being able to enjoy some of the Super S benefits that these shoes provide. So let me know what you think, because it's not about me, it's about helping others come here and figure out what's going to work best for them, because the goal of this is not to sell you shoes, but to educate you so you can make better decisions, so you don't get injured, you can stay healthier, happier, get out there and enjoy running more.